Hi everybody, I'm Joe.
And I'm Mary.
And we're Book Buds. And today I'm standing with a Holly Black expert. She has read almost every single thing that Holly Black has published.
Yes.
And she did extensive work, extensive research, and has read all of these books. And you
Yes.
loved every minute of it.
I had so much fun doing this because I've never really set out to read everything of an author before. And this was like a real challenge. I had to print out everything from Goodreads because it was overwhelming to look at everything that Holly Black has ever written. She has so many different kinds of publications, so many different collaborations and like novellas, and just she's written in comic books and like YA fantasy magazines back in the day. I think that was what she was doing before she was publishing her own books. So everything is listed in Goodreads. So I had to print out, this is like pages and pages of stuff that I was keeping track, checking off, did I read it? Could I find this in the library? Was it something I wanted to read, you know?
Yeah.
So there's definitely some things I was like, okay, I'm not gonna dig out those old magazines that she was writing.
Right.
I'm
Sure.
gonna skip that. My main goal was, can I read every single one of her novels?
Yeah.
You know, and I have. And then
Hey!
I also checked out some of her graphic novels because I wanted to see what they were about, and I checked out some of a lot of her novellas, and then she has kids stuff too that I did read. So I'm going to share about it all today. I'm going to kind of chunk it together in different categories, so just to keep it neat. But I'm excited about talking about Holly Black.
This is such an accomplishment. I love it.
Yes. Now you know why I love Holly Black. What did I first read?
The Cruel Prince series.
Right. And I
Yeah.
made you read that, and you loved it.
Love the tone of that book.
Yes.
So good.
So that's how I first discovered Holly Black, was with the Cruel Prince series. And we have other videos on that if you want to check them out. But for those of you that don't know, it's basically something that's set with like a bunch of fae as the main characters in the storyline. And there's some humans that are in that world and exposed to all of this craziness of the fairy world. And it's pretty dark, right?
It's dark yet, like, I don't know, adventurous.
Yes.
The tone is perfect from like what I love to read.
Yeah.
For fantasy. So,
Yeah, we really enjoyed it. So when I read Cruel Prince, I read all three of those, 1, 2, 3, and then I was like looking to see what else she had written, and she also wrote something called the Modern Fairy Tales. And at the time, I thought they were linked. I thought it was like a spin-off of the Cruel Prince, and I'm like, they're all related, but they're really not. They're not. So first, I'm going to talk about her fairy books. Okay, so she has the Modern Fairy Tales, and there are 3 books in that series. And that one is kind of set like in the city instead of in the forest where the Cruel Prince is. So it's kind of like city dwelling fairies and like slum kind of things, and like they're in the sewers and whatever else. And there's some like drug involvement that makes the kid question their reality and whatnot. All very good. Weren't as good as the Cruel Prince, but still a fun fairy story. And then there was one that was like a standalone that was called The Darkest Part of the Forest, and you read that one also.
Yeah, I like that one.
That one I thought it was like also a companion to Cruel Prince, but it really wasn't. It was just that she writes kind of like the same fairy elements into all these books. That's what made it feel so related to me.
Well, just a quick interjection. I think
Yeah.
she's kind of confusing us because she's rebranding them. All the covers look like Cruel Prince for all these.
Oh, really?
So,
Okay.
like, if you look in the bookstore, they all look like they're like of the same series.
Interesting.
If you pay attention to the covers.
Uh-huh.
So,
Well,
it's a little weird.
It's almost like you could say that it's like within the same
The world.
world. Like
Yeah.
she's married the books together, you know?
Yeah.
So there's those that are all part of the fairy world. Then there's also, which I found just recently, something called The Good Neighbors. That was a graphic novel. And that one, there's 3 different graphic novels. They were very quick to read. I think I might have read all 3 in the same day because you can just whip through them. Strangely, I read these graphic novels on my phone.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So has anybody ever read a graphic novel on your phone? I don't recommend this. I'm like pinching and like to try and see like,
no.
what's this a picture of? Let me find that little dialogue.
Yeah.
And yet I still read all 3 in the same day. It was good. This one was about a girl whose mom was a fairy and she didn't know it. And so the mom like disappeared, and then all sorts of stuff happens between the fairy world and their town that they kind of like didn't recognize was there. But when all this stuff happened, they're like, oh, they are there. And this girl's finding out like, oh, I have fairy blood in me. So it was three books that were very much like Cruel Prince kind of storyline,
Okay.
but they were just quick graphic novels. I wouldn't say if you're a fan of Cruel Prince, you're going to love these, go out and get them. But I enjoyed it enough. So of her graphic novels, that one I enjoyed. The others I did not. I just like opened them and closed them.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. And then her other stuff that's fairy related is the Spiderwick Chronicles.
Yeah.
The Spiderwick Chronicles are actually really tiny books. They're these little ones like this. And the first series has 5. Then there's a follow-up series that's got 3. And then another series with 3 more. So there's a ton of these little tiny books out there. You didn't enjoy these.
They were all right.
They were cute.
They were okay.
But it's not like, something we're going to be passionate about. It's something that kids might like,
Yeah.
But they are very Holly Black. She did write these with Tony DiTerlizzi. So it's not just her, but this kind of like, it has the essence of her fairy stuff through all of it in a similar way.
It's cute.
It's cute. So this was such a hit. I mean, they did a movie and everything. There's a number of other companion books that are so cute. So I had to check them all out from the library because I just really wanted to be the Holly Black expert here, okay? So
You've earned the title.
thank you. This one is Arthur Spiderwick's field guide. So this is the actual field guide that they refer to in the book that the uncle was like making. And it's cute because you can fold out and have like pictures of critters and things like that in there.
Oh, wow.
And he's got all his notes identifying like different parts of the body of the sprites and the this and the that, you know. Look at this cute one.
Oh, yeah.
Isn't
Love
that
it.
cute?
I love it.
So it's his actual field guide, which is really cute. Then this one is one of those books that like you have too many little paper flaps that like you're gonna open and close and lose all the pieces for,
Really?
Like there's an envelope here that you can open and there's something inside of, and it's like, I would never want to read this to a kid. This is the kind of book that like, if I had something like this about Lego and I'm trying to read it to my kid as a bedtime story, it's not a bedtime story. You have to jump around to all these little squares. It's really something for like somebody that's like really enthusiastic about the Spiderwick Chronicles. Then the kid could like explore and open this other envelope to find this other thing, pull this little thing down, It's like a pop-up booky kind of thing.
Yeah.
But cute for a fan,
Yeah, I like it.
And then I like this little one right here. This one is the care and feeding of sprites. So it's just more of the same, They hit something good, so they kept doing more. You've got a diagram and a description of different sprites on each page. And they're so interesting because they're very bug-like.
Yeah.
They've got bug wings.
Yeah.
See that?
Yeah. I like it.
Yeah, they're tiny. But it just talks about how you keep them happy. It's like little cutesy. This is whimsical kind of stuff.
Whimsical, yes. This is definitely whimsical.
Yeah, so that's everything about Spiderwick Chronicles, and I'd say that's your kid version of your fairy stuff. So that's it for fairies. If you're other than there's a lot of novellas. She has so many novellas. You will find lots and lots of novellas that are related to fairies. So, and I'm going to talk about some novellas later. Another kid series, since we just talked about kid stuff, is called the Magisterium series.
Oh, yeah.
And I read that one a while back, and I would say it's more like juvenile, so maybe like middle school aged. I really enjoyed it. There were 5 books in that series, and it was about a kid who was being raised by his dad, and he was told like that magic is bad and we're going to distance ourselves from that, but then he somehow gets recruited and pulled into schooling and going away, and like their school was like in this weird cave, like out in a remote area. It was kind of dark and scary, and you're kind of trapped there. And he had a wolfhound as a pet that was actually the embodiment of chaos or something like that. I loved it. I enjoyed it. It was different from other magical worlds. Like I really feel like this kind of stands alone on its own. And I loved it. So I would recommend the Magisterium series if you enjoy reading like a middle grade book.
Was that co-written as well, or just her?
Let me check my list. Look at that. It actually says here Holly Black and Cassandra Clare. So Cassandra Clare is the Shadow Hunter lady, right? So she has a ton of her different series in the Shadow Hunter realm. And I did notice when I was looking at different novellas, they had written even like a novella together. So I think Holly Black and Cassandra Clare are some nice friends. So they did collaborate on the Magisterium series.
Oh, okay.
Pretty cool. Good question.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me talk about graphic novels next. I only found maybe like 3 different ones that I could put my hands on to experience her graphic novels. Good Neighbors was one that I mentioned already. Liked it. Lucifer, I was not a fan. This is a series that's written by like so many different authors. This one she collaborated with 3 others, but I feel like each one of the series, there were different authors thrown in there. And like, I'm looking and I'm reading different bubbles, and I'm like, none of this feels like Holly Black words, because there's so many different authors writing it that if she wrote a bubble, somebody else edited it and took the Holly Black out of it. You know what I meant?
Oh man, yeah.
So I had 3 of these. I just like skimmed through them and returned 2 and just kept one for the video, because I was like, I was not interested in this at all. So I don't recommend.
Ooh, this looks good.
No, I didn't like this one either.
It's not good, guys.
Flight of Angels was another graphic novel. I don't know. The illustrations were interesting.
Better than the other one.
But at the same time, did not have the essence of Holly Black. So I didn't have the patience to get into this story. You're very intrigued by the pictures. Yeah,
This is beautiful.
It is pretty. But and you know, I'm sure there's something nice with the angels and whatever, but like, and they've got fairy ears in there and whatnot. I couldn't make myself actually read it because I did not enjoy when I started reading it. So yeah. So I mean, if you guys want to check it out and tell me differently, I'd be interested to hear that. But I just decided I was on such a mission. I had so much to read that it was okay if I DNF'd some stuff and said, this is not what I want of my Holly Black.
Yeah.
You know?
Sure.
Right? Okay, so then let me tell you about another series that she wrote that I read in completion. It's the Curse Worker series. I told you a little bit about this before, right? Yeah. So there's 3 books in that series, and I had been wanting to read it for a while. I was excited that I got my hands on all of them and read them. It was basically about people were cursed with different abilities. Not everybody had the abilities, but everybody across the board had to wear gloves, because you could touch somebody and influence them with whatever your curse is. So if my curse is luck, I could give you good luck or bad luck. If my curse was death, I could touch you and kill you. You know, so it had to be like skin on skin contact. So if you took your gloves off in public, it was like an offense, like a legal offense that you could get in some serious trouble for taking your gloves off.
Yeah.
So that storyline is a little strange. You know, I don't know that I was like, wow, this is so cool. But the characters in the series I loved. I was absolutely into the story. There's this one guy who doesn't believe that he has a curse, but you still have to wear the gloves. And he's in the family where everybody's got a curse. His grandfather can kill people. His brother can change people's memories. His mom, I think, influences people's luck. And he's nothing. But, I'm going to spoil a little bit. I don't think it's a terrible spoiler. But his brother, who can influence memories, has actually been erasing his memories of his ability. And he does have an ability that's pretty dangerous. Like, people would crack down on this guy if they knew that he had this ability. But they use him in their little crime family of curse workers and then change his memory.
Oh, wow, that's quite a twist.
So it was pretty cool. I liked how the story progressed. I loved the different characters. I loved the different relationships, the conflicts in the relationships. So it was still really like great writing, great Holly Black stuff. Just the idea of like, you know, my hands have this curse and I'm going to touch you. I don't know. I don't necessarily want more from that world. You know, 3 books was enough. I enjoyed them. But really, really well written. So I highly recommend them just because the story was fun. It was engaging. It was interesting. There were twists that were so interesting. So that was a cool one. Okay. So she has another series that she just started, which was The Book of Night. And I read that one just recently. And when I was reading it, I was texting Joe and I'm like, Joe, I'm so disappointed. I'm like, this is new Holly Black. I should be really excited. I should be really engaged, but I'm just not. And you remember how disappointed I was? But then at the end, I was like, oh my God, Joe, it was so good. Yeah. So it absolutely got there. The premise of the story is that your shadows can quicken, which means like come to life. And not everybody has a quickened shadow. Like, it's kind of rare. And people like the main character's sister is like obsessed with it. She really wants a quickened shadow. And the main character's like, oh my God, no, like, let's just move on from this, right? So of course the main character, her shadow ends up quickening, the sister's doesn't. But what happens with the shadow, so like if my shadow is like alive, I can like poke you in the ear or like choke you or whatever with my shadow. I could just be standing here and put some of my energy and my essence into my shadow and like command it off to go do my bidding, and you wouldn't see it coming so well.
Very useful.
Yeah.
Wow.
What made the story slow for me was that it was something that was new to the world. I think people only knew that they had awakened shadows for like the past 30 years. And so the girl who was like obsessed about it, you know, she didn't even know that much about it. Like, how do you get your shadow to quicken and whatever? And she'd go and talk to researchers about it. And, you know, they didn't have a good grasp of their own world. So as the reader, you're like, I don't have a grasp of this world. You know, you're in that parallel experience with them. So it was just like, well, so I don't get it. But as they're getting it, and then at the end, you're like, oh my God, shadows can do what? Like, it really blew my mind. And I can't wait to see what she does in the next book, because she just did something really amazing at the end of that book.
Well, that sounds really good too.
Yeah. So I did like that one. All right, so then she also has some standalone books. One is called The Coldest Girl in Cold Town. And I put off reading that one for a little while because I had read a novella called The Coldest Girl in Cold Town. And it's about basically a vampire town and like some people that want to become vampires and they want to get into the area that's blocked off for vampires to stay in, which is Cold Town. Okay. So they want
the same author?
Yeah, this is Holly Black.
She wrote a novella and a book the same title?
Same title. Very confusing. Very, very confusing.
Okay.
Because I read the novella and I'm like, oh, I can check off Coldest Girl in Cold Town. And then I look at the book and the book is like 400 and something pages and I'm like, no, I can't check the book off yet. Damn it. So the novella is kind of like about a friend that wants to get into Cold Town and they're like, no, you idiot, we got to stop you. Okay. But it starts exactly the same way as the book starts. Okay. Maybe like the same 10 pages at the beginning of the book as the beginning of the novella. So then when I'm reading the book, I get irritable when I have to reread something that I've read before. I was just telling him, I picked up a book just now that I started reading and put down. So like rereading the words that I already read makes me insane. So I'm like, oh, get past that.
Yeah.
So that's what happened to me at the beginning of Coldest Girl in Cold Town. But once I got past it, I'm like, okay, this is a very different story. She's taken it, like the novella inspired her to write, you know, a full-length novel. And it was about a girl that was at a party and she wakes up like passed out in the bathtub upstairs. She had been vomiting because she drank too much. Everybody in the house is dead. And it was like this big party, like all these teenagers had come to celebrate whatever the heck. And vampires had come in and killed them all except for her. And she finds one other living person tied to a bed and there's some demonic vampire thing also chained there. And she frees them both. So this kid that she knows that's been bitten and this very demonic vampire that's been in chains frees them both. I mean, like, I don't know why she doesn't value her life, you know? Like, this was dangerous. But she flees with both of them and tries to get to Cold Town so that they can go and be safe. And she's to figure out, like, am I going to be turning into a vampire or not? And Cold Town, all these kids watch live feeds of Cold Town and they think it's the coolest thing and they want to get in there and they want to be a part of the vampire world. But she's like a little older and wiser and she's like, this is so dumb that my sister needs to stop watching those things. Like, Cold Town is dangerous. And so you get into Cold Town and you see how dangerous it is. And the most interesting character is this demonic vampire dude. We don't really know who he is, and you're kind of discovering his role throughout the book. So he was a very interesting creature in this book. So I do recommend this one if you like vampire stories. It's a little different from other vampire stories, and it was good.
All these books sound great.
Yeah.
Wow.
That was a good one. Now, another one that I really liked was called Doll Bones, and this was also a standalone. Doll Bones was shorter. It was less than 300 pages. But it was interesting and dark and it gave me like this real creepy vibe. Okay, just the cover, like Doll Bones, it just, I don't know, there's something about it that I'm like, ooh, it doesn't sit right with me. So these kids were playing with dolls, and they were playing with like toy cars and whatever, and they were a little bit old to be playing in this childlike manner, and this one kid's dad was like making fun of him and telling him they had to stop. But they were like committed to this fantasy that they had created. They had a whole storyline of how their figurines would interact. His dad threw out his figurines and he could no longer play in the storyline with his friends, and he was like crushed, and I was crushed for him because he was like not ready to let go of his youth, but his dad was forcing it, and he couldn't even tell his friends. He's like, I don't want to play anymore, but he couldn't even tell them, like, my dad threw my stuff out. Like, this broke my heart. Okay, so in there playing, there was this creepy China doll in the cabinet that was like the queen of their storyline, the Wicked Queen. And it was this really creepy doll in the cabinet. And then the story follows this creepy doll. They go off on a real live adventure where they run away from home. They take the doll. They have to do something spiritual with this doll in a cemetery. And they are off on a journey, like run away from home with this creepy doll. And like, it was creepy. It was absolutely creepy.
Ooh, I love it.
Yeah, so I wasn't sure what to expect when I picked it up because the kids and the main characters were so young. But I enjoyed it. It was creepy. So I love that Holly Black, she does really dark, strange things. And I even found this in all of her novellas too, because like you're reading along, and then, oh, that was so creepy. Like something happens at the end that you're like, oh, it's not right.
Yeah.
So this Doll Bones had that vibe for sure.
You're inflating my TBR. Thanks, Mary.
You're welcome, Joe. So these are all anthologies that I checked out when I was trying to complete my Holly Black quest, okay? So the very first one I'm just gonna mention is Zombies versus Unicorns. I didn't even bother to read this one. It was like, I don't know, all these different authors that were gonna battle out which one's better, zombies or unicorns. And I feel like I read maybe the intro, which Holly Black wrote, but I feel like she didn't even write in it, or if she did, I didn't like the style of it. It was like she was just talking to the reader or something like that. So something about it, just I was like, I'm not reading that.
Okay.
So that was disappointing because I had seen that on her list for a long time. But the rest of these, I did read at least her story from it, and then several others that were like, that I was able to get on my Kindle and whatever else. So this is just a sampling of it. But Half Minute Horrors had like legit a half a page horror story. Not really worth your time to seek that out, in my opinion. As I said, there were a bunch on my Kindle. So one was called Poison Eaters, and that is all Holly Black. There's like at least 10, 15 novellas in there that are all of hers. So if you just want to hit a bunch of hers, just read Poison Eaters, and you can skip everything else because they're repetitive. You know, there are a lot that I'd be Googling, well, what's the name of the story in this book? Do I need to find it or not?
Okay.
It's already in Poison Eaters. I don't need to read it. So that's why there's so many like notes all over my papers trying to figure out what do I have to read? What do I have to read? There was one that was called Geektastic. And in that book, she wrote one that was about a Klingon girl and a Jedi boy who met at a convention, and how like they're not supposed to date. Like that's totally not right. But they woke up in bed together. So that was a quick little novella that was interesting. The one you're holding had one that was called Everything Amiable and Obliging. And this was about a girl, Amelia, who fell in love with like an animatronic robot dance instructor. And so like everybody had these robots in their house to help them with different things. And so she had one that taught her how to dance. And she's like, but I love him. And then of course, you know, they take over the house and there's, you know, death and mayhem. And it was like, you shouldn't love them. It got dark. That was interesting. What I like about the novellas is some of them are just so very different.
Yeah.
You know, like several of them are about fairy type things, but then others, they're bizarre and different. She did have a Maleficent story one in one of hers that was very cute. This one, let me find Under My Hat.
I've been eyeing that. That looks great.
Under My Hat. This says Tales from the Cauldron. So this one is like focused on anything witchy, you know? So in that one, there's one that was called Little Gods, and the girl went to like a Wiccan festival in the woods. She like left her house and was like, I'm a big girl, I can handle this. And she went to a Wiccan festival and then like seemed to summon like a sprite or something that I think only she could see, and became friends with them. And just, that was her little adventure.
Okay.
And this one, 21 Proms, there's 21 different novellas about prom related things. So she wrote one about two guys that weren't going to go to the prom, and one of them ends up going, the other one ends up like alone, but he goes into like almost like a warehousey abandoned building or something, and he finds this other group of kids doing some kind of chant-like thing with some drugs, or he's not quite sure what, and he's kind of out of it. So you have like the unreliable narrator, and then they end up going to prom in this weird state, and then everybody at the prom gets drugged and very strange things happen. You're like, wait, is this really happening? You know, it was an interesting prom story.
Okay.
Rags and Bones. This one had one that was very creepy. So the mom was like passing her kid off into different families. She kept like creating a fake story and making the dad take her kid home, and then, oh sorry, I can't come pick her up. And then this girl, she slowly kills the kid that she's made friends with in the house.
Oh, wow.
Okay, and then they end up dying, and she moves on to the next house. And so here she's made friends with somebody, and right at the beginning she's like, wake up, wake up. She's killed them, and she didn't want to kill them, and she's hoping that like they're not dead yet. And it tells the whole tale through like what she's been doing to this kid and how like she feels bonded with her. But then at the very end you find out, like, I'm not even really sure, like it's, you know, it's vague and it's weird and it's, I don't know, but you find out that you think she's a ghost. And like she's trying to like keep her life form by killing and stealing stealing from these kids. Very creepy.
Yeah.
Very different.
Yeah.
You know, so unique. So Teeth, we've got vampire tales in this one, and this one, her story was called The Perfect Dinner Party. So there were two siblings. At first, I don't think I realized right away that they were vampires. I can't remember, but you know, there was something creepy about them. You felt like they were in this old dusty house that like nobody lives in, but yet they're living there. And so the brother invites this girl over, and then all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, are they gonna kill her? You know? And then the uncle, who's also a vampire, he comes home. And he's like, you guys have been doing this all wrong. Like he had left them in the house and they were supposed to be doing a certain vampire task that they weren't doing. And then, you know, people end up dying and different paths end up being explored. They end off setting off onto a different mission at the end of the book. And the girl who's kind of like weak in the book ends up being the strong one at the end. It was an interesting progression of character. But again, like really creepy, unusual novella. Last one I'm going to talk about is from the Coyote Road book. What is this? The Coyote Road Trickster Tales. So each tale is about something that's tricky. And so this girl, her dog dies and she wants to bring it back to life. So she is in this competition with the devil to see who can eat the most gummy bears.
What? I did not see that
coming. She can win. He needs to bring her dog back to life.
Gummy bears.
Yes, and so she does something that tricks him where like they both have the same number of gummy bears, and so he's like, haha, you didn't win, but she does something that tricks him and she did win. But like really unusual, right? So I mean, I talked about a couple different novellas. There's so many more, especially in the Poison Eaters. I don't think I really talked about any that are in there. But I read all of those. Really just interesting stuff, Holly Black. She's got so many stories in her mind that have come out in all these little novellas. You know, and it was nice to see The Coldest Girl in Cold Town, that she took that and developed it into a novel. Like, I think she's got an endless well of ideas that she could put into bigger novels, you know?
Yeah.
So that was fun to see. I didn't feel like I needed to read 100% of her novellas to say that I'm like a Holly Black expert now, that I've read everything that there is to read. But I'm really enthusiastic and excited that I did so much to like really research all of her different things and read them. It was fun.
Well, it was really cool to hear about her body of work.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm almost an expert myself. So is Cruel Prince still your favorite?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. I am excited to see what comes next with the Book of Night, though.
Yeah.
Because that one was left with such an interesting thing. So I wonder what else she'll do with that world. And I'm really excited. She has a new one coming out also that's going to be a duology, and it's called The Stolen Heir. And there's a cage on the cover of that book. So I'm excited to see what that's about too.
Which looks like it's in the Cruel Prince world. That cage.
You think so?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe.
Yeah.
I wonder if it'll be fairy related. I don't know. I haven't looked into what the premise is. But I'm always excited for more Holly Black. Yay.
Yeah. So I just want to give you a shout out. I am just so impressed with how much you can recall all these details from this huge body of work.
I mean, a lot of them were so unique that they kind of stood out to me. So, yeah.
Well, I would not have been able to do that, so I'm very impressed.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks. I feel like I went to Holly Black school today. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. And if you're enjoying Holly Black, let us know.
We'd love to hear what of her books you've read, what you've enjoyed of her, and what maybe you think you might check out.
Absolutely. If you're enjoying Book Buds, give us a thumbs up.
And share us with your friends.
And subscribe to our channel, Book Buds!
I love my Book Buds.